Hi, so today I want to talk about a topic that I personally find very relevant to our daily life, especially in this modern age, and it's narcissism. And it's a topic that I've been thinking a lot about lately, so much so that I have it on my phone case actually. So I have here with us Narcissus. So Narcissus is a character from Greek mythology, and he is essentially this boy who is really good looking, very beautiful. Everyone that saw him would be mesmerized by his beauty. And because of that, he was also a boy full of pride and vanity. He would, for example, say very mean and scornful things to his suitors and cause them unnecessary harm. So one day, the goddess Nemesis, who is a goddess basically in charge of any cosmic imbalance and also in charge of punishing humanity for unchecked arrogance. Nemesis heard of the story of Narcissus and she decided to teach him a lesson. Very interesting. She cursed him to fall in love with himself. So one day, Nemesis led Narcissus to a lake, and as Narcissus lay down by the water, he accidentally saw himself in the reflection and just immediately became obsessed with the image that he saw. And then ever since, he couldn't really take his eyes off himself anymore. He just became so obsessed and just stayed by the lake day and night. And he felt like he was struck by this immense pain, this ache of falling in love with something he felt like he could never reach, and being trapped in a love that can never materialize. And slowly he just grew old and dry, and eventually withered away in agony. And unfortunately, I feel like we really live in a time where this image of the self is amplified and being forced to look at all the time. Social media is the most obvious example, but there are also more subtle structures that are forming very quietly, but really shaping the way we see ourselves and the world very significantly. So, one example I was thinking the other day was I realize nowadays to do anything, we need to create an account. Um, you need an account for talking to friends, you need an account for watching TV, pay your bills, sign up for a workshop, attending events, networking, finding new friends, finding love, or even taking the ferry in New York City. And what these accounts do is they essentially ask you to create a profile. From there, you need to upload photos of yourself. You also need to select a set of attributes, usually, or labels that best describe yourself. And they are supposed to help curate better content. But what they also do is they constantly put the question of how do I want to showcase myself to the world at the center all the time? And they also encourage us to form all kinds of narratives about ourselves. These stories can be very efficient, of course. They essentially serve as a tool to differentiate ourselves from other people, allow us to position ourselves to the right information more quickly, and allow us to build connection also more quickly. And that is very, very helpful in this fast paced life that we all live. But the process of telling these stories also incubates the creation of an identity, a double that is incomplete, fragmented, and also sometimes not necessarily true. And the more you engage with these identities or the created double, the more you assimilate into that constructed image. So the problem with that is you start seeing yourself as an object that is constantly being watched instead of an individual with his or her own free will and preference and taste and freedom. And a self that thinks it's being watched is very passive and reactive. It usually comes with the belief or deludu that all the momentum of the world is directed at itself and it essentially thinks it's a center of the universe. And as a consequence, it is also constantly under the pressure of scrutiny and it feels like it needs to better curate itself all the time. It needs to improve itself, to optimize itself. So life becomes very performative, and to live at that point becomes about putting on this solo show where the ultimate goal is to earn as many eyeballs and attention and approval as possible. And when it doesn't get that kind of feedback, or when the outside world simply just does its own thing for a second, this self will feel forgotten and betrayed and defeated. So, to avoid that awful feeling, it usually enters this spiral of watching itself even more intensely to think about all kinds of way to regain that lost attention. And sometimes that attention can even come from ourselves. We are literally capable of starting a series of self-worshipping activities. Um, at that point, we become the law of our own universe, and everybody else just feels like they're the NPC or they're living in it. And you may even feel powerful and almost godlike for a moment, but usually that won't last long. You soon feel overwhelmed by this insufferable void inside of you. And the reason we feel that is because this possessed self is essentially living in a vacuum, and it is living this scripted and closed loop program that simply takes what it wants to hear and see and fabricate a fantasy through narratives and project back at itself. And this process is very repetitive, addictive, and very defensive. It's also very mechanical and depressive as well. In this universe, you are shutting everything out. You essentially imprison yourself in this world full of mirrors, and everything you see only end up being references to yourself. For example, other people's action become a self-assessment tool instead of being seen as independent and really just neutral events. And other people's opinions become anti your opinion instead of being seen as an incredible opportunity to get to know each other, to really get to hear their unique upbringing and their unique life story. And this world that is full of mirrors is a very, very small world. And in this world, you are recycling outdated concepts, past experience, unfounded assumptions, and also rootless imagination. And funny enough, this self is actually like an NPC in a game where it would just repeat the same lines at the same spot in the same small village throughout the whole game. There are no growth, no journey, no adventure, nothing new. And it is essentially a deck game where no other possibilities will ever be introduced. And in it, we just end up like narcissists. We die metaphorically in the agony of isolation, emptiness, and boredom. Do you remember the earliest memory? There was a point where everything in life just felt very new and fresh and exciting and rich. And back then, the boundary between you and the so called world was actually very blurry. You were able to see things for what they are. You saw the flower just for the flower. You saw the stars for the stars. And the world back then was full of wonders, and everything was just so unfamiliar and magnificent and just felt different. And that sparked imagination, that sparked creativity. And all these amazing feelings actually come from uncertainty. It is exactly because nothing is certain, the blank space can spawn new things, and life can come from nothingness. Matter come from annihilation. So to live means to live with uncertainty. And uncertainty actually means letting go of a fixated self, And it requires us to let go of any self-limiting narratives, to replace that curated image with a dynamic process, to replace fantasy with presence, and self-gaze with true connection. And really, the world is so vast, and I believe we are just born to explore it. We are here to take risk, to seek truth, and sometimes even to get hurt. But also, from getting hurt, we are also able to rebuild, and that is an amazing feeling. I think this is what true freedom entails, and these are the most wonderful things that life can offer. The easiest way to get out of that narcissistic state is just simply stop looking. Stop looking at yourself. And it could be tough in the beginning until you develop a certain kind of awareness. So I think an easier way that I would recommend is practice looking outside. In fact, I encourage you to not only look, but to truly practice seeing. Practice seeing things for what they are. For example, you can pick a plant, a house plant, and you can start observing the shape and the form of it. You'll start noticing how they change every day. And that is an amazing feeling. Or practice seeing a stranger. When you talk to a stranger, you can perhaps start observing how their eyelash look when they talk, and maybe they cast a certain type of shadow under the sunlight. And when you're finally able to slow down and see things for how they are, you notice everything is fluid. There has never been a fixated self, a fixated narrative, or fixated anything. Everything is just floating and evolving and experiencing. And the moment you realize that, that's when we can finally live again.